And we're live. What's up, everybody? We're back. And as you may noticed, Ackerman is not here. He had an issue with his dog today, so hopefully his dog's all right. But you got me, and we've got Ryan Wheeler. So today, we've been talking about it the past few weeks. We had, I think it was 2 weekends ago. It was 2 weekends ago, Ryan, that we had those level 4s in like the Denver Boulder area.
Yeah, first week of December.
Yes, we had like 2 in the same weekend, and I think of the 8 people that went, 6 of them were part of the Best Hour community, either on the Best Hour team, they're part of the Knowledge, they're part of Philly University, and Ryan was one of those guys. And so we're gonna talk about him preparing for the level 4, and spoiler alert, he passed. So we'll dive into that. But as always, we want to take your questions. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I also dropped on our story, if you didn't see it a couple days ago, I put a question box out there because we want to answer your guys' questions. So if you got topics, if you've got questions that you want us to hit on, maybe related to this call, maybe an additional topic, drop it in the comments, and I'll be looking on our YouTube channel for those topics. So if you got something you want to see Ackerman dig into, or we can bring somebody like Ryan, who's smarter than Ackerman, we can bring him on the call to answer some questions. So drop those in there, and we'll jump into those. So without further ado, let's.
James already with his question.
Yeah, yep. So yeah, if you're new around here, James likes to stump me with Star Wars trivia questions. So what do you got today, James? What holiday was introduced in the Star Wars Holiday Special bonus? Which major character from the movies celebrates this holiday in the special? It is... oh my gosh, what's it called? What's it called? Because it's not Christmas, but it is the Christmas special, and it's for Chewie, because they go to Kashyyyk. Man, I'll get to it.
Yeah, see, I remember it being Wookiee related, but I don't remember.
Yeah, it is. It's Wookiee related. I don't remember what the holiday is. It's going to come to me. I'll circle back around, James. I'm going to think on it as we're chatting.
James, going with
I'm not giving up yet on this one. I know this one. I'm not giving up yet.
The 3 for 3 stump is what it's going for.
Dude, either James is this good, or he's dropping into Google and just looking up really hard. I didn't know I got the character part. Thanks, James. It'll come to me. So anyway, is it Life Day, James? Is it Life Day?
I want to say that sounds correct, but
I don't know. We're gonna move on. We'll see what James has to say. Anyway, so Ryan, I want to talk about your level 4 prep, and just to boom, nailed it. James was yes, it was Life Day. So I wanted to give a little bit of context, because it wasn't just like you took your level 4 this weekend. You and I have been plugged in with Ackerman and Best Hour through what's now called the Knowledge Pro. It was called something a little bit different when we jumped in, but it was all about developing coaching, and it still is. Weekly calls, developing coaching. We do both practical and theory, and it's all under the lens of let's create a better experience on the floor for our members. Let's advance our credential. Let's advance our career and be professionals in the space. And you and I have been a part of that and seen dozens and dozens of coaches with wins from level 3s, level 4. There's a couple people that have come through that have actually made it on staff. Even more people who've either started an affiliate in their garage, opened a brand new affiliate. We've had people buy their affiliate. And so all that said, if you're not part of the Knowledge Pro, highly recommend.
It's a place to manifest wins, is the moral of the story.
Yes. But I wanted to set that up because you and I have been doing that now. I think we joined the group in 2020.
Yeah, that sounds right. It got to be January 2020.
Yeah. So we've been we've been plugged in and getting better since then. And I know that this has been a big goal of yours, and this isn't the first time taking the level 4.
Correct. Yes.
We finally nailed it.
Yep.
So I thought that was a lot relevant context. Anything you wanted to add there? I know I gave the elevator version leading up to this.
No, I think that's a good little starting point. The passing it is not easy. It is a challenge, and it requires a not a systematic, but a very uh, dedicated process to how you want to develop yourself as a coach and or an individual for that matter. So trying to figure out what things you need to get better at, as well as what things you're not good at. So like there's a difference because you can be good at something, but you still need to get better at it. Is the biggest little like thing you're fighting for is like, hey, where am I right now? Where do I need to be? And trying to find that the balance of not a perfect coach, but a coach who is elevating CrossFit and really giving a true meaning and understanding to what it's supposed to mean and represent in a class setting.
No, yeah, you nailed that. And that's like a common theme to, the best hours of company. And more importantly, like everybody that's attracted to what we're doing, like they come in with that. They're like, I know how I felt when I took a CrossFit class and I see the potential, and maybe I saw how that fell short of maybe reaching more people or reaching different people or having a bigger impact. And like now I want to carry that baton forward and make that deeper impact. So like on that though, playing devil's advocate, you didn't need the level 4. Like there's plenty of people who are level 2s, level 3s that
they're good coaches.
That are great coaches and like bombshell affiliate owners. Like they're crushing it. They're crushing their classes. They've got a great affiliate. They've got a great team. They're making impact. So why for you is like, why do it? And not just why do it, but like you took it the first time, you didn't pass, and you're like, okay, well I'm gonna go again. How many times did you take it?
So I took it 5 times.
So why was it so important to take 5 times? Because many people would just be like, screw it, I'm a level 3, good enough.
And the I was kind of like reflecting on this as something, if I had not or if I failed this time, would I have taken it again? Yeah, 100%. Just sign up for the next one, ready to go. It's more of the journey for me. It's about learning and understanding where I can develop as an individual, as a professional, and so being able to
go ahead. Let me
being able to decipher where I wanted to be professionally. Like, hey, am I running good classes? I know the answer is yes. Like my classes on average are 20 to 30 person classes. You don't get to be that big of classes if you're not running a good experience. So it's not like I was putting this out there for bragging rights. It's like, oh, I'm trying to be the best coach ever. It was more of, okay, hey, am I doing the right things in this scenario?
You look at Cody saying it looks like you're looking up. I don't.
Cody, to be fair, Pat says the exact same thing. He's always it feels like I'm always looking down at him.
Yeah. Fun fact: if you're on the Knowledge Pro calls, this is how Ryan looks. Yep. This is the setup. Yeah, I think that's super relevant. Like there's and that's what you and I have learned that our biz dev coaches teach in affiliate university is like 50% of our business is the class. And then 50% is all the other business stuff. It's the marketing, it's the sales, it's the operations. But it is super important. And you're right. Like it doesn't get that big unless you're not only having a good time, but like actually making long-term impact with people. Because you can have a fun class, but if it's not like safe and effective, those people like aren't going to stick around that long. That hype will wear off. So if you want to like grow it, you have to like have the hype that attracts new people, and then you also need like that effectiveness that like keeps people improving and coming over time.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing is like, am I successful as affiliate owner? Yes, because I put in the effort to try and run better professional classes, right? It's kind of a one-to-one, like my development as being a better coach, understanding CrossFit better, trying to do everything better leads to me running a better business, leads to me running better classes. So, you know, we've talked about this before, is like, when you pass the level 3, when did you actually become a level 3 trainer? Was it the second you passed, or was it in the process of learning to get there? Right? If I had taken this a day earlier, would I have been a level 4 at that time? Possibly, right? So it's a whole process of what are you doing to improve everything you can to deliver an experience that is something that's unmatched in a world where most people are trying to be in a place where we're trying to duplicate what others do. It's like, well, I'm not trying to duplicate what others do. I want to take what others might be doing well, and I want to try and do it better so that I can provide the best experience possible.
That's cool. So on that note, what did your preparation look like? And how did it change from the first time you took your level 4 to now this time passing?
Yeah. So big thing is when it was first released, and I was one of the first people to actually take it.
Yeah, I remember you jumped on fast because Tony Oxley and I had all talked about it, and you were like, "I'm already signed up."
Yeah, and so I couldn't I would have signed up for the first one, but I was like busy that weekend, so like I was basically the 5th or 6th person to actually take it the first time around, and at that time, nobody knew what a level 4 class was supposed to look like. So
Yeah, we had a rubric that went for, and even, I think even the rubric had, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought they even updated it after they had initially released.
It's so from the rubric we saw in January 2023 to I don't know when it was, January 2024, they made an adjustment to that there was 15 people could be in a class, and then it came down to 12. So
Okay.
there was a little kind of changes there, but and they might have updated some words and stuff like that, but for the most part, it's more just clarity.
Okay.
But again, it's just it was an unknown. It was
Mhm.
just like, cool, I'm going to be one of the first people to throw myself out there and see what happens the fall. And that was kind of true for the first and second time. It was still relatively unknown. The third instance was more of, okay, this is I kind of got an understanding. Like let's kind of dial in these little things here and try and get better at them. Still didn't happen. The fourth time, I actually only missed by just seeing and correcting was the only thing that was the points that missed. So I was
Okay.
really close to actually passing that time around. This time
And
I
so
had
the
no.
first 3 you weren't close.
Well, it was close, but like essentially I was more than 1 point. Seeing and correcting are essentially linked in this testing scenario. So you either get like all 4 points or you don't get any. It's kind of
Oh, okay.
it's like a give or take. So and the reason I think that is when you're coaching, if I give out a cue and it's not the right cue, I'm giving out a correction, and it means I'm not seeing it at the same time. So I've kind of linked them in my brain, like, okay, both of these have to be true at the same time. And if
Well,
I
as
had
in
that,
like for the evaluator, it has to be because like I don't live in your brain, so
right,
like I can't. I have no idea what you actually see,
yeah, and
and
so
I
like
don't know unless you go to correct it.
if I correct something and it's not what the evaluator saw, then the evaluator is like, okay, well, they didn't see or correct the right thing, even if I gave out a correction. And that was something that early on in my process, it was, coaching was, hey, how are we giving enough cues? Are we making people get to where we need to? Versus a shift of thinking, okay, I'm giving out enough cues, but are the cues I'm giving out effective the first time? If they're not effective the first time, am I giving a correction, or am I sticking with the same cue, just trying to say it harder? So it's a balancing act of like understanding that the cue you might have given wasn't the one that was needed, and just trying to find that sweet spot and balancing act.
Got it. What I'm hearing is like relentlessness, and relentlessness doesn't mean just keep saying squat lower. It's
Yeah,
like
and
going to that same fault, but trying different tactics to be able to elicit the change that you want.
yeah, and you don't learn until you are relentless with it.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, I would kind of strategically do empty reps just so I could pay attention to whether the cue I gave fixed the thing I was trying to fix, or if it was like, okay, hey, we're gonna do another rep. No, that still wasn't there yet. What, like, just the process, like, what is actually going on here? So you could get used to seeing and then correcting the right thing.
So are you talking about like in your regular classes you would do this, or like during the level 4, this is a strategy you had?
So during my regular classes, it was,
Okay.
hey, yeah, this is going to be an empty rep because I'm trying to get my brain to process what I want you to do, as opposed to just yelling out, elbows up, wiggle your toes, get lower in your squat. Like, okay, yes, those are all true, but like, is the athlete actually understanding the position they need to be in with that correction? Is really the big nuance there.
Yeah, it's the check part of show tell do check,
Yeah. It's like,
right?
okay, the athlete did it. They did the thing I told them to do, but is it actually, and is their movement better? Possibly. And I'll say possibly because uh, if we change the load or their fatigue, is that movement still the same, which essentially is the threshold that we're looking for? Or does that bring it back to that same issue that's kind of a recurring theme?
Okay, that makes sense. So did at what point, again, looking at this through the lens of preparing for the level 4, was there a point where either in your preparation or even taking the level 4 where you're like, okay, this is as much as I'm going to get out of this person? And if so, like, how did you know? Because it's the common thing that we hear when coaches join. They're like, when's enough enough? How relentless is relentless? Like, or when people say this is as low as I can squat, how do I really know?
Yeah, and I think on that one, you have to verbalize that you're okay with it. So, what I mean with that is all athletes should be working to their best ability. So, if an example, like somebody can't get their hips below their knees in their squat, it's like, all right, Christian, I see you working really hard getting those knees out. We'll work on the depth a little bit later. and
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
and now, like, I've communicated to you, like, okay, I'm doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing. It sounds like there's some things I need to work on, but then at the same time I also want to balance, like, okay, if we're not actually hitting the squat, should we be increasing load in that, with that capacity, right? It's more of me communicating to you, like, understanding, like, hey, we need to hit these things before we go up in load or go up in intensity in general. So it's amazing how it always comes back to the mechanics, consistency, and then intensity. But being able to evaluate that and check that off through the process of a class is really the challenging part. And one of the things I actually thought about the other day was a class should be structured more or less in that fashion. So you have a general warm up, you're just working on basic mechanics.
yeah.
Then like your skill specific warm up is like, cool, can you consistently apply the mechanics we kind of implemented in the general warm up? And then the workout part is like, okay, can you apply the intensity that we developed through consistency and mechanics earlier on in this class? And it's about kind of creating that flow.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I like that, circling back to where you had said, like, hey, we're going to work on it later. Like, that's so applicable to a class too, where like somebody, maybe they've got a mobility issue, or you're doing cleans and you're like, it's not clicking. And you're like, I know I'm going to have an opportunity to like one-on-one with you for 2 minutes later on in this class, but it's not right now. So I'll be like,
Yeah,
hey, Ryan, I'll circle back around, but then I need to make sure I actually circle back around.
and that's part of the balancing of that relentlessness is like, okay, I've given you 3 attempts at cues. I didn't get it right. You still haven't gotten it right. everyone else is suffering because we're having to do more reps because neither of us are getting it right. So it's like, okay, I'm going to move on, but I'm going to acknowledge that, hey, we're not there yet. I want to keep working on it. And like, that's okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay to have to come back and do it again, because that's where we really learn is like, oh, I still need to work on getting better with this individual on this thing, whatever it happens to be. Maybe it's a timeline. So it's okay to like miss markers and miss points, because that's when you learn that, all right, I have a weakness and this is something I have to develop and improve.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And I've been thinking about like as you go through and you find those people who you're like, oh, I need to make sure I need to circle back around with them. And even if you just think about your timeline, like knowing like where are my spots in my class that I could do this. Like for me, it's always like bathroom break. And so it might be like, hey Brian, like I'm gonna hit you up during the bathroom break. And then when everybody else in the bathroom, I'm like, all right, bro, this is what we're gonna do. Real quick, like squat, cool, nice. And I got it a little bit better. It's like this is what I want you to do for the workout. And maybe I pulled out a med ball for you or something. Or if you're doing a heavy day and you're like, hey, everybody's got 2 warm-up sets on your own. I'm coming over. I'm like, okay, hey, real quick, let's fix it. And usually like 30 to 60 seconds of like deliberate one-on-one can get me a lot closer than, like you said, holding everybody in a static position while I try to fix you for 8 reps during my teaching session.
And we've all been there. Like you, you know, Jay put out the thing like, hey, you should be embarrassed of the coach you were a year ago. And like when I think back on my journey, I'm like, oh man, I had some people like really suffering in some positions that was probably a little cruel. But you learn and you develop and you try and get better. I think you get a recognition and a feeling for how people are doing, but at the same time, you kind of got to remind them like, hey gang, we're warming up with an empty barbell right now. Prescribed weight's 185, 125. So if this is heavy for you, like this is a learning experience that we can develop and get better at this thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Even during like if you do a mini round or a test round, I'm like, guys, like we're gonna do Karen. If 20 wall balls felt like your eyeballs were gonna explode, maybe you don't do the 20-pound wall ball. You're gonna do 150.
Yeah, maybe we just do air squats, right? I mean, like
yeah, like what do we
squats for people is hard, just to stand still and not move.
Yeah, do 150 air squats as fast as you can. Let me know how I feel. You feel terrible. So was that like the main focus of your preparation? Is that what I'm hearing is like a combination of C correcting, triaging, and then threshold training?
Yeah, and I would say layering and teaching is another big thing. And I feel like layering is a word that gets thrown out a lot, but it's so unique to whatever movement you're doing. And what I would like to like kind of reassure people is less is more.
Could you give an explanation of layering for people to know what you're talking about?
Yeah, so layering would be as we're kind of progressing through a movement. Let's take an air squat for example. I might have them do a full air squat, like, hey, we're gonna go down, but I just want them to initiate or focus on initiating with their hips back and down. And what's happening is I'm gonna tell them, all right, we're gonna do an air squat. I'm gonna demonstrate it, and then I'm gonna say, I want you to initiate with your hips and drive your knees out towards your toes. So now I'm looking for 2 things. One, are your hips going back and down? And then are your knees driving out towards your toes? Those are the only 2 things I'm looking for. And I can see both in that process of a warm up. There's 3 other things.
And really one's a static and one's a dynamic.
Yeah. And like, especially if you're just initiating, it's like, okay, hey, they're the hips, and then the knees are the next thing I'm looking at right away. Yeah. So I can see it happening. Things like the heels staying down, hitting depth, and then maintaining your lumbar in the squat. Okay, those are cool. those are going to be the next things I layer on. So it's like, hey, on this rep, I want you to focus on reaching your hands to the ceiling as we squat so you guys can maintain a good lumbar in your back. And
Yeah, so what you're essentially saying is like, hey, we're gonna pick 1 or 2 points of performance that we're gonna associate with a step of my progression.
yes. And
Um, Go
but
ahead.
at the same time, like you got to give the athletes one, maybe two things to just focus on. Like this is it. Like, hey, just raise your hands as you go into your squat, and that
Yeah.
way you got that position so they can feel it and feel where they're supposed to be in that process.
Yeah, and that's what I teach my coaches, because one, like so many people like I see run a progression in a teaching session, and they'll be like, all right, we're gonna do the deadlift and shrug, ready go. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you want them thinking about? And then what are you looking for? Um, because those should be they should be related. And what I mean is like some people will go in and they'll be like, oh well, hey, we're gonna do deadlift and shrug, and we're really focused on hip extension. I'm like, nobody knows what the hell you're talking about. Like, I know what you're looking for, but it's like, so what is human language? What's simple language that you're looking for? It's like, I'm looking for you to squeeze your butt before you shrug. Like, cool. Awesome. All right. Now hip extension, your members know squeeze your butt. It's like, cool. Now
Yeah,
I'm going to walk around and I'm going to look at that.
and that's where like saying, however, when you say like squeeze your butt before you shrug, the first thing is like, okay, I'm looking for timing in
Right.
that process. It's like, hey, I have to see the hips open before your shoulders shrug. And now all of my cues are going to be related to that one thing.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, keep your arms longer. You squeeze your butt harder. Pull your shoulder blades back. It can be anything. It's any cue that works, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, no, I'm just dialed in on this one thing. If they're, if they have something really egregious, you might fix it. But for the most part, it's like, hey, we just need to dial in this one particular thing in order to go to the next step. Because ultimately, like, I need to get you to the full movement at the same time, because that's where all the things can go wrong as opposed to just one little thing at a time.
Yeah, and this is like, and we drill this into people's heads in the coaches development in Affiliate University and in the Knowledge Pro, and so many people like miss it, and it sounds so simple, but it's like hard. It's hard to do if you've never done it before, but it allows you to like laser focus on one point of performance, and then what it does too is like when you do introduce the movement, it ends up alleviating so many faults that would have happened if you would have just jumped to the movement. And by layering that teaching that way, I noticed that like instead of 1,000 things being wrong with my class, like, oh well, now I've pretty much narrowed it down to like what's that big thing for each person, because I've gone through and I've checked all those boxes. And I might have realized in the first step, like, oh, Ryan's is this timing. And so I know like, all right, this is the thing I'm gonna have to drill, but I was able to cover all those other bases leading up to it.
Yeah, and so I would like say one of the things you can do as a coach is when you write down your notes is like, okay, what do you want to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I was going to write a paper and I was like, okay, I'm looking at the air squat, what do I want to happen? Say, okay, first I want the hips to descend back and down. I want the knees to track over the toes. I want their hips to get below their knees. And I want them to maintain their lumbar curve the entire time they're moving. So then now I have that. Obviously, they should be keeping their heels down the entire time, but I have those 4 things that are like relatively dynamic. So now, how am I going to get them to do that? What am I going to teach them that allows them to understand these principles without just saying, hey, get your hips lower. Hey, keep your heels down. Hey, keep your back flat. Those don't really mean a ton to most people. And I say most because there are cues that could work for some. But what are some teaching points that I can reflect on to give them to focus on while they're doing those things?
Do you always or typically teach your movement in the order of which the movement's performed? So like you described the air squat basically from top down. Do you typically teach it that way?
No, it'll vary. And this is something that like you have to practice and play with. Is you might feel more comfortable teaching something in a different position, like a deadlift. Maybe you start at the top and you work your way down. Maybe you start at the bottom, work your way up. Yeah, there's, I think, certain movements you naturally teach from a down up position or up down, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah,
But
like you're not going to teach the strict press from the top down.
right, yeah,
Probably not.
but however, like we look at a thruster, and arguably you could teach the receiving of the barbell, like if you do multiple reps before you teach the pressing overhead. So like you would kind of break those two up. So like because I
Okay.
want to see timing on the way down and timing on the way up. So the question is like, which one do I want to focus on more in this scenario?
Yeah, or like sometimes I'll teach my thruster as push press front squat thruster. And it's like when in reality it's actually like front squat push press thruster if
Yeah,
we break down, if we break it down that way.
and neither is bad. It's just a question of like, okay, what is it leading my athletes to a good movement pattern?
Yeah, that's really cool. That's cool. Um what were some things that you learned kind of along the way at those 5 different level fours that do you remember some of the key takeaways?
I mean, you don't get a ton of information. You really just
Okay.
kind of get like, hey, I failed in this area, and you kind of get. I think really with the big takeaways is kind of working with the knowledge team and seeing, hey, where can I develop as a coach? What are these things that these level 4 coaches are doing that I'm not currently doing?
Mhm.
And really decipher like, okay, they're doing that, how can I do that, right?
Okay.
Like what needs to change in my process to be able to do what those people are doing in there, because again it comes back to we didn't know what a level 4 class looks like, and I was giving out tons of cues, and I think a lot of coaches can give out tons of cues, but are they the right cues? And you don't really know until you get feedback on it, like somebody else watching be like, that could have been a better cue. What are some other ways we could have figured that out versus just like trying to like, oh, I just have to give out more cues.
Yeah, or even like going back to our uh focus during that step of the progression, maybe you paying attention to, is this the most optimal place for me to focus on bar path? Or would it be better served if I put it in a different spot? And that's something I'll coach my coaches on too. I'm like, yeah, you could have, you know, even though you could have looked at it there, I'm like, something would have fit better in that spot.
It's way easier to coach as an observer than it is to coach, like be the head coach of the class. And
Yeah.
because you just get to slow everything down. So like even just as a coach, you gotta understand like, okay, I'm on timeline, but I also have to slow this process down so that everyone understands everything that's going on. So it's a balance for sure. And even with your example, the you can do the same progression over and over and over again. But I would also say that you might try some others because it might be a bit better. And what I would really kind of look for on each progression is like, did that get me to the end result? How quickly did it get me to the end result? And then did I see the things I wanted to see? Because if the answer is no on any of those, then it's like, oh, cool, I need to go back and rewrite this progression so it works a little bit better in this process for whatever you're developing.
Well, and I don't know about you, but I won't necessarily use the exact same progression if I'm coached that same class multiple times in a day. Because it's like, to me, I may need to tweak it for the crowd.
Yeah, and I was like, it's kind of back to the 5 a.m. is that test class, and because you test something, you're like, oh, that progression didn't work out the way I wanted it to. It didn't allow for people to be able to do multiple reps, or it didn't allow for people to go heavy enough, whatever the issue happens to be. But at the same time, you can change it and go into something really quickly. So being able to just recognize things that could have gone better go a long way, as opposed to like walking out of every class saying, "Oh, I crushed that one." It's like, all right, That was good. There, no class is gonna be perfect. And you don't need to do this with every class, but if you're going to take like one class a week and say, this is what I want to work on, this is where I want to dial in, and be able to say, okay, be honest with yourself. That was bad. That was good. That was okay. Like what needs to be better in this process?
Yeah, you're always gonna have lemon classes. That's
Yeah.
why I was like, that was a lemon, throwing it out, never moving on with my life. Like that didn't go how I wanted.
And like, just because it's a bad class in your eye, the members don't know the difference.
Bro, if it was fun, if it was safe, and they got a good workout, they're good to go.
Yeah. They don't care.
Like that was it. That was it. Well, even what you were saying, like I've even recently we had cleans. I think it was a squat clean. And it was from the floor. And I had in my mind my progression, I was gonna actually start everything from the mid shin. So I was gonna do deadlift shrug, I was gonna do a high pull, I was gonna do a muscle clean, everything from mid shin because I wanted to focus on that first pull with my athletes. I get it. I often will scale people to like a hang version if they're really new, so that we can focus on hip extension and timing, because it can be a lot if they're going from the ground and this is their first time cleaning. And so I had this progression planned out. I'm like, I'm going to nail it today. Everybody's going to get better at this. They've been doing this. It's kind of time with the people who are in my class. And then all of a sudden the class shows up and I've got like two people. It's like their first week. And then I've got two other people. It's their first class. I'm like, I'm not using this progression anymore. I'm going back to my go-to. We're doing everything from the hip. We're doing, jump and shrug from the hip, jump and high pull from the hip. We're going to do muscle clean. And then I'll work on my way down. And then I know like I'm probably only going to do 1 or 2 steps now from the mid shin because I'm going to go around to those guys and be like, mid shin's not for you today. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And the goal of like any class is to keep your members or athletes as close to the movement as possible. But at the same time, if somebody needs a modification or scaling option that is going to keep them safer because they're just not clicking, it's like, okay, here's what I need you to do instead. And I would say that's okay from time to time because it's like, all right, if I'm not really dialed in and want to give this person the perfect movement, like that's okay. Like they're just here to move better and feel good. You don't need to crush them into the ground just because they're not moving the way you need them to.
Yeah, and the more complex our movements, the more complex the movement is, like the more often we're going to see that. I mean, just like we do with gymnastics movements.
Yeah, we had snatches yesterday, and again, like what I have 25 or 26 people in my class, the morning class, and it was like, all right, some of you, this is like the second time you've ever snatched. Some of you, this is the 100th time you've snatched, but you still don't know where you put your hands on your bar. So here's what we're gonna do. Like this is where your hands go. Like this is where your feet go every single time. And it's okay because like even when I'm an athlete and I'm taking class, the things I'm saying in my head are feet underneath the hips, hands outside. It's like grab the bar, hook grip or not hook grip, depending on what you're doing. And the athletes should be doing the same mental process, ideally, as we go through. Like, really kind of thinking about, hey, okay, this is my setup position. Because it kind of comes back to what I was talking about. Like, mechanics is the first step. If we don't have those mechanics in our head, we can't implement the intensity.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Gordon. Gordon said this live stream is better without Ackerman. Appreciate it. Appreciate that, Gordon. Appreciate the hype. Yeah, I totally agree. Well, I'm super stoked that you got this. Like it's so well earned. And just like seeing from a third party perspective, like how much work you put in to do that. I'm impressed. It's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, everyone can do it. And like it's not that you need to sign up and take it 5 times like I did, but you have to start dialing in and thinking about where you want to develop. And if you try and do too many things, it's not going to happen. It's going to take months of this. And really the reason being is because the amount of energy and effort required to do a high level, like I'm going to focus on this one thing in a class, is going to drain you for the other classes. Like you pick one class a week, and you might have to do it for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks to be able to say, okay, I have dialed in my general warm-ups now. Like this, I coach all the way through it. I have a good flow. I have a good practice. But at the same time, the athletes, have to still want to keep coming to class. So I can't like drill them too much in this
Yeah.
flow. And I have to vary the athletes I'm using. So there's a lot of like ups and downs to it, as opposed to just, okay, I'm going to come in and run a near perfect class every single time. Sometimes it's like, oh man, the athletes are, yeah, it's a day after Christmas. Like we're just here to have some fun and get a little fitter, right?
I literally had that yesterday. We had one of my members, her dad recently passed away, and then um, a couple people had just came off of traveling for the week, and it was the 6:30 p.m. class, and they walked in, the energy was just I was like, all right, this means my job here is to hype and create a good environment, make sure like you're moving safe, but it's like I'm not hammering you with cues today. So like if I was going into that class thinking like this was going to be the class that I'm going to work on seeing correcting, I'd be like, never mind, not you
Yeah.
guys
And
today.
you have to be okay with accepting that. Like, all right, that's not gonna happen. I gotta switch it up and change it up to a different class or a different scenario. Because while you can develop and get better, it's a distinct like I am focused on this one thing to really get there. It's kind of like training, right? If I want to get a bar muscle up, most people aren't gonna get it the first time they do it. It's gonna take, hey, weeks of practice and training and a little bit of drills to try and develop and get there.
Yeah, and,
And
and like you mentioned too, it's going to be the culmination of small things. It's
right,
going to be working on your upper body pulling strength. It's going to be working on the kip, working on the transition, working on your dip, and then all of a sudden all those things um, come together, and you're like, oh, I got it.
that's it. Yeah, and that's kind of like the mindset you should kind of put yourself in if you're looking to really deliver it and work towards it.
Yeah, and if that's whether you're going for your level 4, level 2, level 3, or if you're just like I just want to be the best coach that I can be, like that's exactly what Ryan and I have been participants in both the knowledge if you're an individual coach and then affiliate you if you're an affiliate owner or your affiliate owner is part of affiliate you. And the people who are earning their level 4, earning their level 3 or any of the wins that we had listed before, we see those
Weekly,
people.
we see them
What?
weekly.
We see them weekly. They're on calls with other coaches, and they're asking questions to our coach development specialists, who are all level 4 seminar staff. They're sending them videos, asking questions. If you're in the Knowledge Pro, they're doing a coach's eye where you get to do a 1 hour class review with one of the coaches. They're going to other people's gyms and coaching classes. I went up to Todd's gym earlier this year, coached a class, and got feedback from him.
Yeah, we did the Knowledge Pro in person too, which was super helpful because like it just brought in a chance to work with unknown athletes. So like it's expanding your comfort zone, because if you're doing the same thing, there is a bias that you're doing, but you might not know what it is.
Yeah.
And if it's not being identified, you'll just kind of not even think about it, because it's just like, oh, that's as low as Sally gets in her squats. She's got knee pain. Like, okay, but when was the last time you worked on trying to get it lower? And it might not be every day, but like maybe once a month. All right, Sally, today we're gonna do squats to a medicine ball as opposed to just squats to a bench, right?
And
It's
that's
like,
such
hey,
a good example too, because like I don't know about you, but I've had so many instances where somebody does an overhead press they don't squat or whatever because they have joint pain. And then when I improve their mechanics, all of a sudden the pain is either minimal or gone.
Yeah.
And it's like, you just didn't know how to squat. You were knee initiating. No wonder your knees hurt.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I don't have any knee pain when I sit down to the bench and stand up. Like, yeah, that's how you should be moving your body the entire time you're squatting, is slightly
Yes.
back and down, yaw your knees out, and then stand back up from it. And then when they start doing it, you're like, oh, I don't have any pain anymore. I'm like, yes, I'm aware. Let's keep working on these mechanics. We don't need to add any load. I just need you to squat.
Yeah, exactly. That's super good. Well, Cody had, I love that, Pat. Bully them until they squat properly. Haha, but seriously.
I'm never above a little class fun.
Yeah.
Let's do like, hey, one more for Christian. Here we go.
Yeah, that is my favorite. Or what I'll do too is I'll say, hey, this is the last one, as long as Ryan does it right. Everyone's like, oh, and he does it. I'm like, we got to do another one. And they're like, whoa. It's like, it's always fun to do it that way.
Yeah, that's, I mean, like, it's a tactic. It's definitely not the go-to tactic, though, right? It's like, hey,
no, it needs to be careful, like who you do that with. Like, you got to know, like, is that person, is that person receptive to that? Or like, you don't want to do it to the brand new person, if somebody who's sensitive. So, pick who you're going to pick on.
That's like a Saturday type class of like, all right, everyone's here, we're having fun, they're excited to be here. And let's have a little bit of laughter in this process.
Right, like again, going back to my 6:30 class last night, not doing that in that class.
No, you got to read the room real quick on that
one. Cody asked, which I think is a good question. Since you're also an affiliate owner, he asked earlier. He said some people pay based on their credential. If a coach chooses to stop at level 3 or hasn't passed a level 4 yet, how do you evaluate and reassess their pay?
That's a good question. So,
do you pay based on credential?
Yeah, technically, I do have a tier for that.
Okay.
And the way I kind of look at it is, if somebody is a level 4 coach, I have absolutely no concern with how you're going to run a class.
Yeah.
Like you have proven that you're going to run a safe class. It's going to be effective. Members are going to get moving better. And there's just no thought in my mind. If we have a level 1 credential, I don't have that same initial thought. Now, you could be just as great as a coach as a level 4. However, like, my thought is like, okay, why is there a lack of development? Like, what is going on there? How can I encourage you to want to develop? Because ultimately, I think there's a correlation between the affiliate growing class experience and the level of your coaches. Mm-hmm. Meaning that if all my coaches are level 1s, then there's a very rudimentary understanding of what CrossFit is. We start getting the level 2s. It's like, okay, now we have a little bit bigger step of like, all right, my coaches understand what the flow is supposed to look like, timelines, what coaching looks like at this point. If we have some level 3s in the house, then it's the expectation of like, hey, this person's setting the standard. This person can deliver the information in the level 1 and level 2 training guides. Like, they have a great knowledge of what's happening. And then again, like the level 4 is like, all right, hey, you've checked all the boxes at this point. I'm not worried about this. So I would, how would I evaluate and reassess their pay? I would take it on as, how are they improving the experience with where they are? And what I mean by that is like, are their classes growing? Right? Or do I have like members from time to like, oh yeah, I was like, such and such is there. I like it when you're coaching, right? Like, do I hear those comments? Because like, there's a difference. The members can and feel a difference if there's a big drastic one. So as long as the affiliate is growing, that's when it's like, all right, all the coaches are probably doing a good job, especially if a class is growing. And it's not because that class is being sought out. it's because that time slot, they know they're going to get coached a little bit more because maybe that coach is in there a little bit more often. So things like that go a little bit differently.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that like most people who are full-time coaches aren't level fours. And so it's
No.
like there's still money to be made. If you're I think when we have coaches on our staff, we want them to be self-motivated and we want to create an environment that incentivizes them to be motivated. And sometimes that's, um, financial opportunities and that's both with and outside of credentials.
Yeah, and I'll even add on that point, like if I have level 3 and they're like, "Hey, I signed up for the level 4." That would probably instantaneously already put me in the mindset of like, okay, this is a level 4 coach, like in pay. And the reason being is like this person is trying to develop to that level, right? I don't think there's a big difference between the level 4 and the level 3 in terms of pay. It's more of a question of like commitment to growth, like who is trying to be a better coach. Some people are just doing it, right? And it's more of the effort of hours being put in to develop versus the, hey, I'm just showing up to run this class as a helpful thing, and then I'm back to whatever I do for the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's cool. Awesome, Ryan. Well, I appreciate you. I want to be respectful for your time because I know you got to kill ass. They got to coach and jump on. But thank you guys for checking this out. Like I said, we're going to be dropping more topics that are related to the questions you guys have. So, topic suggestions, if you got questions, drop them in the comment to this video, and I'll navigate Jay into having a conversation about that, and maybe we'll bring on more guests like Ryan. And then if you're a coach who wants help, who's looking for their level 3, level 4, or just be better, like we mentioned, jump in the Knowledge Pro. If you use our code Best Hour Live, you get 20% off. And then Affiliate University, we're still running our free credential. Who knows how long we're going to run it for? And the price is going up in February. So if you've been on the fence, you want to help grow your affiliate, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, you should have signed up yesterday, honestly.
Yeah. If you own an affiliate, you should have signed up when you started it, assuming affiliate was around. So, all right. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Later.